tackling insurgency and terrorism. Well, joining us to discuss this is Paul James. He is the Program Manager, Elections, PlusTvAfrica. We're also being joined by Obinna Chukwu. He's a legal practitioner, and Kunle Lawal, who is the Executive Director, Electoral College of Nigeria. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Great. Paul, I'm going to start with you because, of course, Yaga is not just about monitoring elections, but you also do the job of making sure that people are educated daily as to what they need to know in terms of making sure that we have free, fair and credible elections and our rights as voters. So I'll start with this question. Aside from June 12th, that every Nigerian points to as, the most credible elections that we've had since Nigeria became a republic in itself, or since we embraced the act of democracy, or the system of government called a democracy. Has Nigeria, after June 12, been able to point to a free, fair and credible election other than June 12?
Sure, I think there are some other elections that have passed the credibility threshold. I've been based on the lenses that Nigeria will want to do elections with. Me, I always want to see election from a holistic point of view, looking at election from three prisms. One is the idea around inclusivity in election, idea around transparency in election, and also idea around accountability. Oftentimes, we limit election to just the election day. And so people pass that judgment call on whether election is free, fair, transparent, or credible without necessarily looking at other issues or elements around the elections. We have had elections even in recent past whereby human judgment, a lot of people have said, yeah, it has made the integrity threshold or credibility threshold. A case in point is the Edo election and the Edo and Ondo election that happened in the year 2020. These are also because before the election, there were a lot of apprehension based on what we all saw in the build-up to the election. Election day, and this was also an election that happened within the context of the pandemic, something that had never happened in Nigeria. So a lot of things had to be put in place to make the election happen. For instance, INEC had to come up with a guideline to regulate how to conduct election amidst a pandemic. And so we went into that election. Election day, we saw also how INEC introduced technology, and to some extent, that technology also helped to raise the bar in the conduct of election, helped to also bring some sanity to the result collation process. So for me, I think is how we want to view those from a military or a dictatorship to a civilian government. So I think we also have to look at them on a case-by-case basis. We want to view the elections. But then if we go back also, and so in the last 20 years since we have had democracy, how has the election fared? How has the conduct of elections fared, for instance? One issue that we have constantly grappled with is the issue of election logistics, which we saw also play out in the last Anambra election in November. And so whilst we have made a lot of progress, especially in the election administration, there are still a bit of challenges here and there. And that is why after every election, you begin to look at what are those aspects of the election that you want to see reform. What are those aspects of election that you want to see us do better as we engage the next phase of election? And that is why that huge clamor for Electoral Act amendment, which, of course, as we know, is before the president for his assent. We got only barely 6 days until until December 19, which will give us like a month since it was transmitted to the president by National Assembly for his assent. Whether or not that will happen, we don't know. I heard the opening statement by the president. I mean, the fundamental question to ask is, who was the audience? Who was he speaking to? Was he speaking to Nigeria, or was he speaking to a foreign audience? We see a president.
Well, the president was in America. He was attending a democracy forum. I think he was invited by the Secretary of State for that event. So yes, it was not just only speaking to the world, but he was speaking to us Nigerians, because I mean, we're the ones who are going to be participating in the elections, aren't we?
Sure, but then For how long are we going to continue in this manner that the president speaks more to people outside of the country than he speaks to us at Nigeria? This is where we need to do the confidence building ahead of 2023. How many months do we have from now to 2023? Barely 12, 13 months, and then some of the elements that you want to see put in place before the election are not there. For instance, is the INEC, the Election Management Body, fully constituted? We have some positions in INEC that need to be filled, especially the positions of national commissioners. We've got some people that are tenure type. We've got some people that are, their time of office have elapsed and are no longer there. We're not even talking about that.
We'll come back to the INEC issue. Let me bounce to Barrister Obinna. Barrister Obinna, he says that we have made progress in over 20 years, and as at today, he thinks that we can do better. But judging from June 12, let's just use that as a yardstick. We've had other elections, other forms of elections before we decided that we're going to adopt a democratic system of government. So many pundits have referred to the fact that Nigeria's elections have, over the years, have things been better over time?
Okay. First, thank you for having me. I want to whether one will say, will use the word disagree. We have not had any election in Nigeria that one can give thumbs up. Even from the June 12th election that people, all of a sudden, Nigerians forgot what transpired during the June 12th election. And everybody is now using June 12th as a springboard to say that June 12th. Was June 12th really an election, the election conducted the way it should? The answer is no. And you don't just wake up from the blues and you conduct an election. There must be legal framework. The legal framework will tell you whether or not that election will be free and fair. All that we have done from 1992 and even in the past have been a hush or a horrid kind of arrangement where one president comes in or one head of state comes in and the press will now interview him. Are you going to hand over? That's not how it should be.
How should it be?
Legal framework
How do you think it should be?
Impossible. Hello, what did you say?
How do you think it should? What processes do you think should be?
For instance, what happened in U.S. in the 2020 election? You saw how the legal framework in America stood the test of time. Even though, as of today, polls still shows that about several millions, so more than 70 million Americans are still disputing the election. But the legal framework had sway. What we have in Nigeria up to today, we are still discussing whether election will be transmitted, whether we will have a central system where election will be transmitted. All what we still have is a haphazard thing. We have not really done, I can tell you, maybe somebody will say, I am maybe predicting gloom and doom and all that. We are not ready to have elections. What we've been having is a political party comes in and the political party maneuver the other political parties and got people in.
But that's where we are as a country. So how do you expect this change to happen? You're talking about the judicial or the legal framework. These elections are conducted as it is in the Electoral Act, and don't forget that Electoral Act, which is now a bill, is sitting on Mr. President's table. We cannot change the framework, or we cannot go against the framework that we have as a law. So how do we change that? It's in front of our lawmakers. You and I cannot necessarily decide what has to be in that paper. We were not informed to be part of what, that process on the floor of the National Assembly. Yes, we had that thing where the National Assembly members went around different regions and had a sit down and they talked about it, but did it really reflect? So again, when we talk about the legal framework, I'm still trying to pick your brain. How do we have a say in how these things are done? Even with the Electoral Act that we have now, can it change anything, or is it just us, the people, that are the problem and not necessarily the piece of paper?
Let me start with the electoral law that we have now. The electoral law that we have now is not any different from what we have had in the past. It will only still at the end of the day, still give or pander towards a political party that has the majority. The only way the citizens
But elections are a game of numbers.
This,
it is a game of numbers. So the guys with the highest numbers will win. It's the same thing anywhere in the world, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, I agree. But what I'm saying is that it is a game of numbers. For the citizens, those numbers that are human beings should first of all pride the nation before selfish interest.
Okay.
Before their own interests.
I'm going to come back to you. Let me come to Kule. Kule, you are of the Electoral College, and I've been looking at your facial reactions with all of the responses that are coming. He, on the other hand, is saying that all that we've had over the years has been a sham. He's talking about the fact that if we don't fix the framework, the legal framework, then we cannot really expect magic to happen. But we do have a legal framework. We have something, especially that which is on Mr. President's table. You were here the last time we had the row over the e-transmission of results. So really, what is the...
Look at Nigerian elections. From 2015, we've had less than 50% of the voting, that's registered voting population, participating in elections. 2019 was so bad that you have 84 million registered voters, and you now have 28 million registered voters participating in an election. This is bad. If you want to lift the level of how the Electoral Act functions, we have to be able to demand this from our lawmakers. But how can we demand it when the population is massively politically illiterate? Politics is not emotional. You see, we take emotional stands on how things are going. For a country with the problems we've had, we've made genuine progress as regards our elections. You can look at America. I think women started voting in 1960, which is more than America at 200 and something. People that didn't have massive wealth started voting too, sometime around women to voting at the same time. So Nigeria's problem, one, participatory. Two, we need to understand what exactly we are demanding from our government, and the truth is, and the truth is, we can't understand these things if we can't demand if we don't understand. So the Electoral Act has some flaws. Yes, we always complain about the monetary fact of elections, but their campaign limits within the Electoral Act. We do not call our politicians we will not call our politicians and say, this will not be tolerated by the people. We don't do that. And instead, we are the ones actually...
Should we be doing that when there are laws already that negate these actions?
The thing is that laws in a country do not stand up and act if the people do not demand those laws to function.
Agreed.
So if we generally think, I just decided today, May is deciding to run for office in Lagos, and then next thing I say is, oh, May, that means you are declaring for us this afternoon, you are buying us lunch. That's our general thought process once somebody's running for office. So we created the buffet of corruption, which we call politics, which is why we don't get anywhere with it.
Now, trying to get people involved, because you're talking about participation here, and you've showed the decline in the space of 4 years and people not being interested anymore. Now, the average person you talk to in terms of getting involved in the elections, they say whether I vote or not, it doesn't really matter. Things keep declining. Whether you push and you shove, it still doesn't change anything. So there's that resigned mindset already. And so how do you even get the person out of that mindset? Even the second class, even the guys who you think should know, are also part of that particular
you know what
people.
we need to understand in this country. Now, I'm not saying this is what is obtainable, but this is how it will work if you want to rig an election. You will need someone not to come to an election for you to use his card to do something else. If we can get this into our mindset, then we might understand how elections are rigged and try to cut it down to the minimum. So If I came to the ballot, regardless of who I'm voting for, it means my card cannot be used to appropriate some kind of misdemeanor. But if I sat at home and said, you know what, this election is not going to work, it's not sensible, it's not even credible, you have crucified a system you don't even understand. And I sit down at home, and then you look at it, okay, card number, this didn't come to the polling station, but it's within this word. Let's make it look like the person voted and then put it here. So you are even facilitating the fact that frauds are committed during elections.
So we keep talking about people not being educated about these things, most people do know. They know that whether you vote or not, you have made a choice one way or the other. And then there are people who don't even know. The people that you think do not know, the people that you think are uneducated, are the ones who actually file out in their numbers to vote. And I keep asking everybody, and I'm asking this question to you, Paul, I'm asking this question to you, Barrister Obinna, why is it that those of us who complain the most, those of us who think or seem to be the ones who should be knowledgeable about these things, are the ones who sit at home and watch the elections play out on TV?
Let me explain something. We normally assume being politically illiterate is commensurate to the education we have. That is wrong. Political literacy does not have anything to do with education. It has to do with understanding the way the system in politics works. So I'll tell you, you have more people that are party members at the grassroots. I can tell you the average middle class citizen, and middle class here does not mean middle class based on economics, or middle class based on political middle class, which means you've been to a university or a secondary school. I can tell you that if we point to the room, they don't know their local government chairman, they're not part of a political party, and they can't even name up to 3 political parties out of the 18 that are functional in Nigeria.
Well, that's sad. I'm going to come back to you, Paul. There are very many factors that have been named over time as factors that impede and, do not allow for us to have free, fair, and credible elections. We're talking about money politics, like he's mentioned. We're talking about violence, ballot box snatching. It sounds like something that is in the Stone Age, but it keeps happening in Nigeria, a country that should be in the forefront of, yes, we no longer are a third world country, we are a developing country, but this is still happening in the 21st century. And several other issues, people not joining political parties because they say, politics is dirty. Just to buy to some of the things that Kunle has said, as Yaga Africa, as a Nigerian who's been trying to work on the mindsets of people, do you think that we've been able to at least scratch the surface of people being politically educated and not waiting for the NOA when it's few weeks to the elections?
So I think Kunle has succinctly captured it all. The wheels of democracy for me are about inclusion and also participation, these two things. These two key things. Now, I was in Zambia for the elections back in August, and I met a voter that traveled for 600 kilometers to come and participate in the election. They don't have the election. And so for me, I keep asking myself, what are those lessons to learn from this election? Each time we keep hearing about the political alternatives, that they are not what people want. We keep hearing things like the devil and the deep blue sea. But then the challenge has been always around the culture of participation. Participation has been very low, has been very poor. I agree that political education is also poor, but then it also starts from the person, it starts from the mindset. If the options that are there, if the options that are available are not what people desire, it's a democracy. People have the opportunity to also bring up who they think they desire. So, and again, because we have left this engagement has been reduced to episodic engagement. 2023 will not start in February 2023. It started in 2019. But most often we wait until the eve of the election or the month of the election before we begin to hear about these political preparations. There are opportunities that are presented to people. For instance, voter registration is ongoing. How many people are engaging the process? This has started since July of this year. Ask INEC today and see only about 1 million Nigerians have registered and have collected are in the process of collecting their PVC. Another election happened in last August. About 120-something persons registered for the election. After cleanup, 77,000 new registered voters were added to the voters list. But this is a state that has over 5 million people that inhabit the state. So I think it starts from even that mindset change. If the options are available, like I said, I know what people desire. Democracy presents them the opportunity to even come up. Once they organize and they organize well, they can even set up their political parties and come up with that person that they think.
Oh, please don't get me started with the political parties and the numbers. I don't even want, that's a whole kettle of fish on its own. The numbers keep growing, but we don't see the participation. But let me come to you, Barrister Albin, now. There are those who are of the school of thought that these political parties and the elites in those parties are deliberately keeping the electorate in the dark. And again, the people themselves, this is a school of thought, saying that the people themselves also have resigned to some form of fate. And then that's the major problem of participation in the country. That's one. Secondly, why do you think that many Nigerians are more averse to joining political parties as opposed to just showing up on election day to cast their votes?
Yes. Number one, I think your statement, so I think that you are right. The problem with the participation that my friends have been hammering on is that you cannot have large turnout or the so-called high participation when there is no confidence in the electoral system. There is no confidence. In fact, from the first day the party in power selects a candidate, everybody knows that whichever way the person will win. There's no.
But 2015 was some form of a difference. I mean, for the first time, the party at the center did not necessarily win the presidency. We saw that President Goodluck Jonathan, former President Goodluck Jonathan, stepped down and lost the elections.
Yes, 2015. 2015 happened because there was an attempt. There was an attempt to have credible election. Number one, card readers were introduced. Secondly, the chairman of INEC that was appointed, as at that time, I can tell you, somehow was apolitical. He didn't pander to any political party. And again, the Justice Uwe's report, commission's report, also came. The then president was trying to somewhat implement that. So let me go back to voters' turnout. You will not have that desired voters' turnout when there is no credibility in our electoral process. Secondly,
where is the fault? So if the credibility of the electoral process is where I'm at now, because that's what the president is promising Nigerians. He's saying that he's promising that there's going to be a peaceful transfer of power to whoever wins at the end of the day. He's also saying that he would ensure free, fair, and credible elections. And you're saying that the average voter cannot say if the process is credible, and that's why we see the level of voter apathy that we're having. But is that the fault of INEC? Is that the fault of political parties? Is it the fault of the people? Or what exactly is the problem?
Yes, I will not lay the blame on anybody. I will say everybody should share from the blame. One, the government should share from the blame. Who over time has promised the people of free, fair, and credible elections and failed to do so. But again, let me just conclude my position on the low turnout of citizens' participation. Like I said, when there's no credibility. Secondly, have we tried to introduce other method or means of voting?
Like?
Take, for instance, last year or this year, Big Brother Nigeria that had about 3 or 4 means of voting had more than several billions of voters. This type of voting that we must shut down the system every Saturday and now force people to go to vote, that we have tried for more than 20 years now. Is it working? Why can't we have a election result?
Okay.
Then another thing again that we must also look at is the way we have monetized politics in Nigeria. Look at the salaries of those people. Look at them. Once you are elected, for instance, as a legislator, I can tell you by the time you serve 4 years, you would have gathered enough money to get yourself elected in the next election.
So bottom line, let's make these offices less attractive financially so that we can have better leaders.
Let's make the offices less attractive.
Okay.
Why can't we grade the levels?
Okay.
Let them be at the same level with civil servants.
Okay.
When you do that, there will be less confrontation. People will reconsider.
Okay,
before going in,
because we're almost out of time. Let me let Kunle have the last word here.
I think there's something we need to stop doing, and that's comparing Big Brother elections to Nigerian elections. The winner of Big Brother is not the commander-in-chief.
I'm not comparing.
He's not the commander-in-chief.
He's talking about the voting process, how the votes are collated.
I understand, but you also cannot compare it, and there are reasons why. We're a country, I'll give you an example. Anambra elections, over 5 million people in Anambra. I think only about 200,000, not up to 200,000 participated in the election. Who are you going to hold? A credible election is not judged by the number of people that come out. INEC's job is to ensure that whoever's vote that is cast is as is when collated. That's credibility. Participation, poor participation, is because simply we are not keyed into political parties. So I'll give you an example. The average Nigerian knows what goes on within the Democratic Party in the US, knows what goes on within the Republican Party in the US. Yet, we do not understand what goes on in any party primaries, including
Could it be maybe because we don't know that because they don't have ideologies,
now,
and we do not know what they stand
ideology.
for? Do they?
What's
the ideology of the PDP and the APC?
PDP is actually more a capitalist party, and then APC is actually more, you would say, like a government intervention.
Overnight, for example, Governor Ben Ayade of Cross River State realizes that he is no longer a capitalist and he wants to join the APC. Is that what you're saying?
The truth is that I'm sure.
I'm going
to answer this. I'm sure His Excellency has not read the constitution of his political party, and I'm going to be firm about this. And that's the problem in Nigeria. If we had an influx, a massive influx into political parties, we'll be more concerned about elections that go on in Nigeria. If we had a critical mass, ensuring that political parties bring out credible candidates.
So bottom line, the politicians and the elites in the different political parties are politically illiterate, and that's why they keep cross-carpeting from one party to the other.
I'll tell you, the average Nigerian is politically illiterate. I'll tell you, because most of them don't even know their functions. Even those serving in office do not know their functions in the National Assembly or elsewhere.
Well, on that note, I want to say thank you to all our guests. Thank you very much, Barrister Obinna, Paul James of Yaga, and of course, Kunle Lawal, who is of the Electoral College Nigeria. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being part of the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, this has to be an ongoing conversation, but thank you all for staying with us. When we return, we'll be discussing the travel ban controversy surrounding Nigeria, the UK, and other countries. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Whistleblowing is all about giving information secretly, surreptitiously to the establishment for them to carry out certain actions. Information that will help the economy. For example, you have a criminal, you have an armed robber, or you have a permanent secretary or an auditor general, or somebody is committing some sort of fraud in the ministry. You go and disclose to the authorities so that they investigate. That's what he's talking about. That's why I say you don't just take the information hook, line, and sinker. You know, because what if that information is a function of laws? What if the informant louse or reviles the victim and will just come up to say, this man, just because he's his political enemy, or just because he took his girlfriend, or just because he slept with his wife, will now say this man is involved in this. I know so many cases like that this man is involved in this, and in actual fact, the man is innocent. And if you have such an informant that dispenses mendacity, then that informant himself. And that's why every whistleblower, the operatives must ensure that they know the houses, they know them to their houses. If you come and give me any information, you must show me where you reside, your office or something. I must trace you to something, your village, everything. So that if that information is questionable, I will come back for you. And that will very large extent will discourage dispensation of falsehood.
Where there is a right, there is obligation. And because there is a right, because there is a right and obligation, there is also a benefit. And if there is a benefit, there must also be sanction in the context that when the whistleblower is found to be culpable, what happens to him? Because based on that information that is adduced, the magistrate takes an action. And of course, in order to be able to issue the warrant, the law is Section 35, Section 36, Section 37, Section 38 of what they call it, the Part 3 of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. The magistrate will not just act in fact, will not act. The magistrate is expected to know the facts. The magistrate is expected to be furnished with who you are going to arrest. The magistrate is expected to be furnished with that information regarding the identity, the location, and whatsoever.
Yeah, because we are in a country where people in authority disregard the law. The people in authority doesn't bother about what the law says. They only bother about what they want to do and what they think they should do. Because the issue of autonomy has been in the constitution since 2010 or so, and I don't know why it's not being implemented to date. In fact, to the extent that the president even make an executive order, a superfluous order, trying to enforce the provision of the constitution, yet we have not heard anything about it. So I think it's a confirmation of the kind of country we are. We are in a country where we don't care about law, especially those in authority. They ignore the law when it does not suit them, and they follow the law when it suits them.
I don't know the reason why our government have failed to name and shame these criminal elements here in Nigeria. Terrorism has been striving, just like Ambrose said, it's as if it has become a good business here in Nigeria. But for me, I will hold the Nigerian intelligence network accountable because we cannot have an effective intelligence mechanism in Nigeria and we still have this criminal and this sponsors of terrorism excelling within the confines of our country. It's a failure on intelligence from the Directorate of Military Intelligence and other intelligence networks that are supposed to stage a sting operation against these conflict entrepreneurs that are benefiting for the security situation in Nigeria. So what I would advise the federal government to do is to start naming and shaming those that they've arrested.
The federal government has what we call the legitimate instrument of terror. The Constitution has given it to the federal government. The federal government is in charge of the police. The federal government is in charge of the DMI, the NIA, the Navy, the Army, the police. They are in charge of the custom, the officers of the correctional centers. So the civil defense. So all the apparatus of the security are under the exclusive lead, under the federal government. But our constitution, cheekily, in a very cheeky manner, says that the chief security officer of the state is the governor. But the commissioner of police does not receive instructions from the governor. The GOCs or head of GOC command brigades do not receive instructions. The director of SSS or directors of other military agencies or paramilitary agencies do not receive instruction from the governor. So the governor is helpless in most of the time. He can only do with local vigilantes and some other things he can cook up in his state.
For me, I wanted to change that culture. I didn't believe that until you see a white man or you see a foreigner in the kitchen before you can believe that good food is going to come out of that kitchen.
You can leverage on each other's spaces and sell. We believe in Nigeria, right? We believe that Nigeria can get better. We, the youth, are the ones that can make it better.
And my products are proudly made in Nigeria.
Made in Niger, showing every Tuesday at 10:30 p.m. and repeats on Saturday at 8:30 a.m.
It's still Plus Politics. Now, the British High Commission has announced that the United Kingdom would not reverse its travel ban on Nigeria because of a threat of retaliation by the Nigerian government. The spokesperson for the British High Commission, Dean Hurlock, said this in a response to an inquiry by pressmen over a statement by the Minister of Aviation, Hadi Sirika, that the United Kingdom, Canada and Saudi Arabia would be put on Nigeria's travel ban on Tuesday. Hurlock stated that the UK government has been clear that travel abroad will be different this year, and countries may impose border measures at short notice in line with their own coronavirus policies. Well, joining us to discuss this is Ambassador Joe Keshi, former Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you so much, Ambassador Keshi, for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening, and thanks for having me.
Great. So, let's talk about this politics of reciprocity. You know, it's been the conversation that has lasted all through last week into this week. And I mean, we've seen it happen before within embassies and fees that need to be paid and should not be paid. We've seen that happen even between the Nigerian embassy and the US embassy. That's happened. But at this level, we've not necessarily seen, you know, something like this happen. But why is this particular issue, especially the one that surrounds the Omicron virus, very critical?
Well, I think what we all need to understand that a number of countries all over the world, if there was any lesson they learned in early 2020, when the pandemic started, it was the fact that they did not act early enough. And as a result, the pandemic began to spread worldwide. So what you see happening now, whether the South African variant Omicron is mild or not mild, every country is reacting to the best of the knowledge they have on how to stop the variant from coming into their territory, in order to prevent what happened when they acted too late when COVID-19 initially started. And I think that is what we all need to understand, that they are acting in the best interest of their country. They are taking steps to ensure that they do not suffer the kind of disaster, loss of human lives that characterized the early part of COVID-19, I think, in 2020.
Well, when the High Commissioner of the UK to Nigeria spoke on this issue, she continuously harped on the fact that it was based on science and it was not based on any form of politics or, you know, as the Nigerian government made reference to it, they called it some form of apartheid. They thought that this was the UK and other countries shutting out Africa from their borders and letting other countries continuously travel to and fro their countries. So I'm wondering, the energy, the kind of reciprocity that we're giving to the United Kingdom, Canada, and Saudi Arabia, is it really worth it? Because again, many people support the Nigerian perspective, saying that we need to match that energy that these countries are giving to us. As someone who's worked as a diplomat, is it really necessary for us to expend this much energy?
I'm not too sure it's worth expanding this sort of energy. I think we can spend all the energy we have now on the UAR, that is banning Nigerian flights and the Nigerians from even getting to Dubai. That's where I think we need to spend considerable energy. But on this, again, I make the point. Number one, I think we are overreacting, and those who are calling it apartheid are not being realistic to start with. The first thing I said was that if there was any lesson learned from when COVID broke out some 2 years ago, it was the fact that it took quite some time before the Chinese were honest in admitting that they had a problem. And by that time, COVID had arrived in Europe, it has arrived in America, and then was just traveling all around the world.
But the argument is that when COVID was found in China, apologies for speaking over you. Apologies for speaking over you. The issue or the argument basically here is that when COVID was discovered to have come from China, it wasn't called the Chinese virus, neither was it called the Chinese variant. But then when it was found by scientists in South Africa, this is not my argument. This is the argument that is being had. It was now called a South African variant.
Let me make my case. I think we have been unnecessarily emotional about this, as far as I'm concerned. Look, when the COVID-19 broke out in China, China did not inform the world early enough. And what happened was that it began to spread phenomenally around the world. And we all are aware of the consequences, the loss of life. Take what happened in Italy. The whole of Italy, Italy suffered a lot, for example. And we lost about, how many millions of people have we lost as a result of what happened, when COVID started, and the failure of the Chinese to report early enough. So when the South Africans reported early enough, every country began to rush to take necessary measures to protect their citizens. We must recognize this, that there's a difference between what happened a few years ago. It has nothing to do with China or the South Africans. It has to do with the fact that the governments are reacting in order to protect their citizens. That's number one. Number two was the fact that when Canada first told us, for example, that two people came to Canada with Omicron and things like that, we again did not react early enough. Now, I'm not blaming. Look, we've done everything I believe we need to do, but we need to understand why some of these countries are reacting the way they are reacting. They are doing this to protect their citizens. And that is what governments are supposed to do. Let's be honest with ourselves. That is what governments are supposed to do. You don't wait and say, until people start dying, until you know how severe Omicron. No, they are learning the lessons of 2020.
Okay. Let's talk about the aftermath or the effect that this reciprocity by Nigeria, if it be done by tomorrow, would have on us as a country, and what it would do to the relationships that we have with these different countries. I'm talking about Canada, the United Kingdom, and of course with Saudi Arabia. Is it going to affect us economically and relations-wise?
Of course. Look, it will affect us economically. It will affect them economically also. Everybody is going to pay a price one way or the other. But look, I am in favor of the federal government. If they want to retaliate, fine. They need to do that out of national pride. There's no harm in doing that. But I think that what we need to focus, in my view, is how to ensure that we address the issue of COVID-19 in this country. We need to begin a new campaign to strengthen the procedures in place. We need to talk about wearing a face mask. We need to talk of all the protocols that we have almost virtually discarded. I think it was only the Lagos state government last week that came out with some announcement on some new protocols. But the federal government, I don't know I can't remember what the federal government has done or what any other states have done.
Well, the federal government is insisting. The federal government is insisting that every civil servant, I guess, from the December 1, I think, has to be vaccinated.
This country is not made up of civil servants alone. This country is not made up of civil servants alone, and it's not only civil servants that live in Abuja, for example. It's not only civil servants that live in Abuja, for example. But let me say this while I say how do you on. Look, the way forward, as far as I'm concerned, is let us begin to take measures to address the COVID, the Omicron issue right now.
Okay.
Part of what will help everybody around the world, including Nigeria, is if the threat of Omicron begins to decrease.
Okay.
The world will open again, and now everybody will be able to travel.
All right. Ambassador Joe Keshi, we appreciate your thoughts. Thank you very much for speaking with us.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you all for staying with us. It's been Plus Politics. We'll leave you with what Nigerians have to say about the travel ban clash between Nigeria and other countries. I'm Mary Anna Cohn. I'll see you on Tuesday.
The federal government is right because Nigeria is a sovereign nation. And as a sovereign nation, we also need to make a decision to protect the interests of Nigerian citizens. Because if we look at this issue of variants, some of them come from other foreign countries. And at the end of the day, we need to prevent we, the black nations, from being racially discriminated. Like now they say Omicron variants is South African variants. And next thing, they started banning South African countries. I believe that it wasn't right because it's a form of racial discrimination. So in my own opinion, the federal government is right.
They are doing the right thing because the rate at which other countries, let's just say every time the way they talk to Nigerians, and it seems they take Nigerians as if they are nobody, and Nigeria is a place anyone can just barge in and barge out any time. I think if they are also placing a ban on other countries to come in, it's also a good decision.
I believe Nigeria is a beggar country. We depend on Dubai. We depend on UK. We depend on America, Australia, and all other Western countries. So I don't see any reason why we should put a ban on any other country. What we should do is to resolve the issue for now. So that's what I think.
Thank you very much.
The government should place a ban on any country that places a ban on Nigeria, because no country is greater. No country is greater. So I think it's the right position, on the right track. I'm in support of it.